It's been more than a year since Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the founder and leader of ISIS, was killed in a U.S. Special Operations raid. It's been even longer since the terrorist group lost control of territory they held in Iraq and Syria. But the group is still very active. On November 2nd, 4 people were killed and 22 injured during a shootout in a popular nightlife area of Vienna, Austria. The gunman was killed, and ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack the next day. On November 11th, a bomb exploded at a ceremony commemorating the end of World War I at a cemetery in Saudi Arabia. At least 3 people were hurt. ISIS again claimed responsibility. And earlier this month, a group of militants linked to the Islamic State beheaded more than 50 villagers in Mozambique. Islamic insurgents have been active in this area since 2017, giving the Islamic State a foothold in sub-Saharan Africa. Joining me now is Asha Castleberry. Asha is a national security and foreign policy expert and a U.S. Army veteran. Asha, nice to see you again. Thanks very much for being with us. What is the current state of ISIS?
Well, ISIS has definitely lost its territory, especially Syria, as far as the caliphate, but they have also been able to expand its operations, as noted, in southern Africa, in the Middle East, as well as, Afghanistan and also in Central Asia, and be able to establish strategic alliances in Western Hemisphere.
Well, how is ISIS different now from when it was at the height of its power?
Well, it was predictable that they were going to expand its operations because they did a really good job establishing its international network. So they've been able to leverage that, especially after they lost its caliphate. So it's no surprise in that they've been able to expand its efforts or strengthen its efforts, and especially like places like in southern Africa, where the insurgency is definitely a big concern. But you're also seeing a lack of response from the region as far as countering their efforts because of the fact that a lot of those armies are pretty weak. But for the most part, they've been able to expand itself, especially in places like in rural areas, not necessarily in urban areas, where they can take advantage of areas that are not able to fight them off. So they've been able to reconstitute its efforts.
Yeah, help us understand that a little bit more. So Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in October of last year. The group lost its remaining territory in Syria a few months earlier in March. How was the group able to survive without its leader and territorial stronghold?
Well, it's still well-funded, and actually they've been able to emerge. Their new leader, Abu Ibrahim al-Qusami, who was able to leverage its chain of command as far as being able to spread its leadership throughout the international system in different parts, like in Europe and Africa and Afghanistan, working on different type of missions. So they were always had an established footprint in terms of making sure that they had a chain of command in place in case they lost a leader, which is Abu Baghdadi.
Well, how exactly does the group's recruitment work today, Asha?
Well, I would say that it holds on very well using technology and financing, as well as they're very aggressive in establishing its strategic alliances, and also those returnees that were once fighting in places like in Syria and Iraq, what they do is they go back into other areas like in Africa or in Afghanistan, and they continuously reach out to those that are disinfected Muslims, those that are just coming out of incarceration, those that are feeling hopeless, to help them, to recruit them in as a way to continuously expand their personnel. So they've just been good at it, and unfortunately, especially in the West, we've kind of lost our eye on their expand their operations, where they've been able to continuously expand their operations because the West has been a little bit more distracted. We definitely need more support in places like Africa to continuously counter their efforts in Africa versus not just in Iraq and Syria. So there's definitely some management we need to do better in terms of military operations, especially in places like Africa.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that attack in Mozambique earlier this month. Why is ISIS concentrating its efforts in Africa?
Yes, well, just like I mentioned before, that international network, they've been able to leverage that by reaching out to organizations that are aligned with their messaging, like the Al-Shabaab organization in Southern Africa, who has claimed allegiance to ISIS, has been able to, at once was very weak, but strengthened through financing and more support there over years, especially since 2017. So you're seeing where now they're strengthened. They've been able to conduct counteroffensives in Southern Africa, and they're looking like winners because there's a lack of response. And we have local security forces, especially like Mozambique, who's struggling to counter their efforts.
So when you look across the geopolitical landscape, where else is the group active?
They're active still in Afghanistan, like ISIS-K. You're also seeing them expanding their efforts in Central Asia, as well as establishing their footprint in Western Hemisphere. I mean, it's pretty scary how they're smart enough to align themselves or work with the narcotics groups in Mexico. So they are definitely also expanding in Europe as well. So they're becoming they're smarter. They're just readapting to the new environment and continuously expanding their efforts.
So, Asha, how much of a threat does the Islamic State pose to the United States today?
They're still a threat, and I must say very significant, and we shouldn't keep an eye on them. We have a lot of global threats that we're dealing with right now. When you're looking at the rise of China in terms of their activities, Russian interference, and also coronavirus, and now you're dealing with ISIS. So they're still a significant threat. They just have been able to reconstitute themselves in other places because we've done such a good job in degrading them in places like Iraq and in Syria. They just regrouping themselves somewhere else. And, with the beheadings and being able to penetrate in so many other parts of the area, that's impacting our alliances as well as, make destabilize in certain areas, especially in Southern Africa. So there's still a threat. And I would call on for, President Trump not to significantly reduce our military footprint right about now. This is not the time, especially for the fact that they're continuously expanding in other areas. Now it's time to get more smart and be able to engage the threat and be able to, again, hopefully eradicate in the long term.
All right. Well, Asha Castleberry, Asha, thank you very much.
You're welcome.